Welcome to Miracle Network's Wednesday meditation. I'm so glad we're all here together. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to click the subscribe button below to receive updates and notifications. Today we're joined by Ken Gorman, who will lead us in meditation. Then we have 20 minutes of silence. After that, we open it up for sharing. We end at 10:45. Over to you, Ken.
Welcome, everybody. I would just like to start with a quick reading from lesson 71 to lead us into meditation. Only God's plan for salvation will work. It is senseless for me to search wildly about for salvation. I have seen it in many people and in many things, but when I reached for it, it was not there. I was mistaken about where it is. I was mistaken about what it is. I will undertake no more idle seeking. Only God's plan for salvation will work, and I will rejoice because his plan can never fail.
Open your eyes and come back into the room. We have 24 minutes left for sharing your reflections and your questions. If you'd like to share, raise your hand and I'll invite you to take yourself off mute. Frida, would you like to share? Take yourself off mute. Sorry, Bridget, that's what I meant. Excuse me. Hold on, Bridget. Take yourself off mute. There you go.
Am I off?
They're off. Go ahead.
It's not really about this meditation, but it's about all of the meditation and the study groups and the ACIM in general. I've been wrestling with a problem with a particular friend of mine, and for over a year, and I've been using every tool and sort of practice in the course to try and deal with it, and month after month, without ever giving up, nearly giving up, but never giving up. And then last weekend, I made a phone call and just left a very, very brief message, and I got a phone call back the next morning, and that to me was like a resolution. That felt like a miracle that this person phoned back, because I thought they were going to just be avoiding everything, and we had a nice conversation, and I mentioned a few of the things I was concerned about, and I said, we have to have some real conversation, and real, just really getting into everything. And he said, "All right, I'll ring you back in a few days." But the whole thing went so well. It felt like such a huge move forward, that all of my efforts, because I was practicing all of the things in the lessons, all the forgiveness and all the compassion, just every single thing that's meaningful, and it felt like that was all worthwhile. So I've now just got to see if I can bring the whole thing to a complete conclusion this weekend or whenever he rings back. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Who would like to share? Norman, take yourself off mute.
Yes, thank you. I always have problems with this lesson, you know, ask and you'll get the answer sort of thing, in any situation. But uh, just in that quiet session, there was just a thought just came into my head. God goes with you wherever you go. And that answered everything. I didn't have to worry where I was, didn't have to know where I went, didn't have to worry who I met, didn't have to worry about what to say or what to do. And the answer was very simple. God goes with me wherever I go. So thank you. I knew there had to be a simple answer somewhere, but I didn't think it would be that simple. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Norman. I think I think a lot of this, not a lot. It's all about experience, isn't it? We're getting at something that is part of a visceral experience, and there's 500,000 words in the course that are pointing at it like a finger pointing at the moon, the Buddhists say, right? And and it points at it in different ways, trying to get at it. But what it's the real proof in the pudding is whether you have a visceral experience of it. And I think that what you just said is profound. I think that the course could almost be summed up in a way with that experience you just had. Because if you think about it, what is the course for? It only has one purpose, which is for us to return our awareness back to our oneness with everything, with God and whatever. That's what it's for. It's not for anything else. The ego, spiritual ego, tries to make it into other things, um, and then in making it for those other things, then of course those other things will fail because half of what we do in life doesn't work, and then we wonder why our spiritual program isn't working. It's because spiritual ego is running its own plan of this is what should happen and we should be like this and that. This isn't. That's just I did that for a long time, and it's just a recipe for frustration because it was never about that in the first place. What it's about, in my opinion, is bringing you back to the awareness of what you just said. And it does it in a million different ways. And one of my favorite lessons that epitomises is my salvation comes from me. And I spent a lot of years thinking that was kind of egotistical, and I didn't want to be egotistical, so I didn't connect with it. And it just dawned on me one day what it's saying is it's the same as the Buddhist is teaching that you're already enlightened. And the reason that, again, these aren't philosophical treatises. And these are trying to get at something. And what they're trying to get at is that relationship with Jesus, if you have that, is inside of you. That oneness you have is inside of you. It's all it's ever going to be already. Think of that. It's nothing's going to evolve, nothing's going to be added. Everything is already there. I can just sit and know that. And I might not have an experience of it, right? And I certainly don't in its totality. I don't think I do. I wish I did, but just knowing that it's already there. I'm already that oneness is already there, and Holy Spirit is just slowly uncovering the things that are they call them kleshas in Buddhism. It's confusions and distortions, like your screen on your shower, it distorts the light. It doesn't block it. And what he's doing is cleaning the distortions. But there's one caveat. We have to do this through our own free will. That we have to accept the right first paragraph of the course. Free will doesn't mean you set their curriculum. It means you get to choose when you get to take it. So the free will is we have to show up for our practices. Part of showing up is a call like this is an amazing way of showing up, of saying, hey, we're willing to do this. And then Holy Spirit does the work. So then you go, only God's plan for salvation will work. What is that plan? Well, we covered that. The course will say all the lessons around that one, by the way, are about forgiveness. Then you get into what is forgiveness. We just did a workshop on that last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. Forgiveness really is done by the Holy Spirit. And what forgiveness is letting go of all these other things we think are important. And the truth of this, what's already inside of us, can be allowed to be what it is. But instead, we're so distracted with the external world. I think that's what this, in my mind, in my experience, that's what this is all about. Now, the Holy Spirit will use our dream in the external world as training wheels to get us, because you can do things in the external world that show willingness, right? And sometimes that's all you can do. It's good to get on your knees and pray. Does God need that? No, of course not. But we do, because sometimes my head can't get there, but my body can. I can get my body to do it, and to make a physical demonstration of willingness when my inner self, my can't, that kind of thing. This is just our reality of working through this in the physical world. So it's not to diminish when we forgive someone for cutting us off in traffic or whatever. These are important steps. But the ultimate, I think, is more like what you just described, is realizing, hey, none of this really matters. It's already in here all the time. So I don't know. I thought that was profound. Sorry, that was my spontaneous reaction. So thanks.
Thank you.
Who'd like to share? Jim.
Yes, thanks very much, Dan. What you've just been speaking about, the analogy of the frosted glass in a shower distorting the light. I've found it quite helpful to look at forgiveness from all sorts of angles to get deeper into it, including other teachings such as Buddhism, which you've mentioned. And this idea of claiming comes in a lot in other teachings. And it seems to be the claiming, at least, is it the claiming that needs to be forgiven? The idea that this claim, which is an illusion, it seems as though that is what needs to be forgiven, among other things. Is that correct?
Well, forgiveness is an interesting topic. We had the whole seminar like 2 weeks ago, and then I did something. Forgiveness really, if you go into the Song of Prayer, they have some really good sections on forgiveness and what forgiveness isn't. And they're very clear of pointing out forgiveness to destroy. Forgiveness to destroy is when the ego creates something and then says, now I need to forgive it, and creates this two-step process. And it's quick to point out that isn't what it means by that. The word is a word, right? And so we make it so that keeps us stuck in a cycle. I think forgiveness is much more subtle, and I think it was given to us as a world so that as a word, so we would have to uh, continue to unpeel layers of an onion. I think also admit defeat of not really getting what it is completely. You have that sense like I know the course says this is so important, but I don't really get it. Where does that put you? It puts you immediately in surrender. And to say, I guess I got to rely on the Holy Spirit to show me what this means at a very subtle level, right? Rather than oh, I got this. I can write a whole term paper on it. That's just spiritual ego. The humility is, wow, I've been studying the course 30 years and I still don't get this forgiveness thing completely. The only solution is Holy Spirit. You're right where the alcoholic is when they get into AA, where they say, my life's become unmanageable. Only God can fix it. I've tried to stop drinking for 10 years. That level of humility is when change happens. And so forgiveness has this multidimensional torque to it. But the Song of Prayer is very clear on what it isn't. It isn't an intellectual exercise of thinking we now grasp this and there's this thing to forgive and all that. That's forgiveness to destroy. You can go read it in Song of Prayer to make your own interpretation. I think we're getting in more subtle levels that we seem to be talking about as a group. And Dan started this off when I did this of it, the opposite of forgiveness is judgment, but not judgment like you're bad. If I say it's raining, that's a judgment. If I say that's a plant in my room, or that's a teapot, that's a judgment. What if I didn't judge? What if I just let things be as they are and show me what they are? And so therefore, the opposite of that is acceptance, that I'm being in the present moment and allowing it to show itself to me as exactly is. And we're kind of going down Eckhart Tolle energy, aren't we? Something like that. And so then you go, oh, I get what's happening. I've been projecting out onto this world. Coloring it, that's a teapot, that's a flower, that's good, that's bad, that's whatever, constantly, like a TV screen. What if I just turned it all off and allowed something else to arise and in all that busyness, and then that creates space for the Holy Spirit. That at a very subtle level. Now you only can do this really properly in meditative states, right? Because when we all walk around in the world, you have to judge things. You have to say that light's red, stop the car, right? But at a meditative level, you can kind of get there briefly. In Buddhism, they talk about these glimpses that you get when you kind of get it are super important, even if it's only for a moment, because that opens the crack, and you that crack somehow stays with you. And so, maybe that's what forgiveness is, and it's driving us deeper and deeper into this, allowing Holy Spirit to show us something different, and not thinking we have to know everything and judge everything. That's at a very subtle level, at a very coarse level, coarse meaning rough level. We know grievances hide the light of the world in me, and grievances where I've identified something. I now haven't not only just that's a teapot that doesn't have a charge to it, but I don't like you, you're bad. That has a charge to it, and that grievance energy is actually just the opposite of this very subtle thing we were talking about, and it actually blocks. Grievances hide the light of the world in me. If you go to the book of AA, for example, even them back in 1930s, they knew resentments hide the sunlight of the spirit. I mean, it's incredible. It's everywhere you look. I use that just because it was fascinating me. So, so it's basically saying, you're really working against yourself if you have grievances, and then we slowly reverse down in our practice to something more and more and more subtle. But again, I think where we end up with it is not really ever being able to get it ourselves. We don't really do the course. The course is to get us to surrender, to allow Holy Spirit to do that. And eventually we're letting go of our attachment to ourselves and our lives. That's the whole point of guilt, right? Guilt demonstrates that you were alive and did these things in the past, and therefore you're this fixed entity. But eventually we have to give up that concept of self the way we know it, and so that we have this sense of oneness. And I think that's what it's leading us to more and more subtly. But you can work on the coarse stuff, coarse being rough stuff. I shouldn't have grievances against people. And in your meditations, you can work on allowing that very subtle relationship Holy Spirit can show you, where eventually you don't even have a sense of yourself as an entity the way you view yourself as a person, and it's from that viewpoint that you can have this sense of oneness, and that's where forgiveness reaches its final, letting go of this fixed identity, its final conclusion. Something like that. That's my experience. I don't know if that helps, or it sounds a bit weird, but that's
It does help. I mean, letting
yeah.
go of this fixed identity is really dropping the claim, isn't it? Dropping the claim on this identity.
Yeah, but you can't do that intellectually. That's something
No,
like
no, I know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's done in meditative states. So you have
Yes,
these
yes,
meditative states with one experience
yeah.
that then we got to walk around in the world. And so it's saying, well, when it's like these two levels, right? And where we can always work on not having grievances, right? And not being, and it all helps. And so I don't know, something like that. And
Well,
I
yeah,
guess it does.
that's helpful, Ken. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Who'd like to share? So, Ken, have you found it helpful to use your meditation practices for forgiveness?
Well, in my mind, my meditation practices are handed over to the Holy Spirit, and um, to do whatever He wants to do with. So then you get into what technique you're using. The problem if you use them for something is now you're generating thought, and deliberately, and then you're working against the whole point of meditation, which is to have an experience that's of your awareness that's I guess you want to say separate from the thinking mind. That's basic meditation, basic shamathan Buddhism. So it just depends what technique you're using. I've always, even when I was in the Buddhist communities, started my meditation giving it to the Holy Spirit for His purposes, and then He works on whatever He wants to. The stuff the ego can't see. That's what my experience of meditation is like, going to the gym. The Holy Spirit's working on stuff, that we can't see. So, and so I guess in some ways the answer would be every meditation is about that. And it would be one answer, but do I have a deliberate technique? No, because then I'd be thinking about it and I'd be working against the techniques I'm using, if that makes sense. Because then I'd be thinking, oh, there's that, and now I need to forgive it. And did I forgive it? No, I failed to forgive it. And now in Buddhism, you would just label all that thinking and ignore it, because what you're doing is you're getting a sense of yourself as just the awareness. And after a while, you see that the thinking mind is over there. You know, the Eckhart Tolle experience, right? He realized that his thinking mind and his awareness were separate. So,
Thank you. Who'd like to share? Bridget?
Well, that was very, very helpful. Just referring to the Holy Spirit, you're just operating on a completely different level, aren't you? You're not being the ordinary identity you are in everyday life. So you are putting yourself into a completely open to a completely different experience. So it makes sense that you're not just being as you are in your ordinary thinking life. You've put yourself onto a different level, or opened yourself to a different level. And if anything comes about, it's because you've been open to that Holy Spirit level. I found that very helpful, just to have that concept.
yeah, and I've always said that's what I think the main purpose of the course is for us to develop a surrendered relationship to Holy Spirit. If you could say there was a point, that's its main thing. And the reason you go, well, there's 500,000 words, how could you make it that simple? Well, yeah, the 500,000 words are great entertainment, but in the end, we're surrendering to Holy Spirit, who's like spiritual broadband, who is then informing and doing the healing and informing us and whatever. If you have that, you don't even need the 500,000 words. If you have now, I need the 500,000 words still, because I still have an active mind and active ego. But in theory, you know, the Holy Spirit, you will tell me where to go and what to do, with whom to speak and what to say, with thoughts to think, what words to bring the world. You know, it's pretty comprehensive. What the Holy Spirit will do if we're, but surrender is the gateway.
And being
Spiritually,
being open to it.
yeah.
Being in that mindset and being open to it.
Yeah. Well, and you hope that you get there voluntarily, because we're all egoholics, right? And so in you know, in an addiction program, you get there because you're so broken by the addiction that the only choice is to allow God to intervene. Even if you didn't like a God before, you don't have a choice, and it works really well. We hope being egoholics, we see the ego's not getting us anywhere, and that's why we are attracted to A Course in Miracles, and so we need an alternative, because we're not being satisfied by that. But it's hard because the ego is very addictive, and then the ego reads our course with us and then becomes spiritual ego, and we have to be careful of that as well. And so,
Okay, we've come to the end of our time together. Thank you, Ken. That was wonderful. And take yourself off mute. Show your appreciation to Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.